Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Cobbs Corner. I'm your host, Morgan Cobbs. It has actually kind of been a hot minute since we have made a new episode. I guess before I actually officially start this episode, brief life update. I recently graduated from the University of Bridgeport with my master's in mechanical engineering, and I did make a post on, like, for those of you who follow my Instagram and my TikTok, you will know that I decided to take the month of May off from posting. So, it is now the month of June, and we are back. Cobbs Corner, we are back. Although I'll be doing something a little bit different. I realized that this podcast, after 1 year, it's been primarily focused on like superhero movies. I've talked about mainly Marvel, some DC content. I've covered some Star Wars content, and don't worry, I'm going to continue to cover that content going forward. But I just wanted to kind of take a little break from that. And one of my listeners, you know who you are, recommended that I review, and there are 8 movies that will change your life. So for the next 2 months, for most of the summer, I'll be reviewing these 8 movies, and I'll be doing them in order of release. They are Groundhog Day, which will be today's episode, Fight Club next week, Catch Me If You Can the following week, then The Count of Monte Cristo, Elf, Crazy Stupid Love, Limitless, and we'll be ending off the series with The Way, Way Back. So, yeah, I'll be able to kind of pick apart these films and, analyze them, and pretty much we'll be able to discuss, like, what do we learn from, like, these movies? What do we take back into our own lives? And we'll be kicking off the series today with Groundhog Day. So on Groundhog Day, IMDb, Groundhog Day is a 1993 comedy starring Bill Murray. It's got a 8 out of 10 IMDb rating, and it was directed by the late Harold Ramis. God rest his soul. If you guys remember Harold Ramis, he played Egon in Ghostbusters, and they even just, I think, 2 years ago with Ghostbusters Afterlife, they had paid tribute to the late Harold Ramis. So he both directed, wrote, and starred in this film. Makes a cameo. So, IMDb, the short description: a narcissistic, self-centered weatherman finds himself in a time loop on Groundhog Day, and the day keeps repeating until he gets it right. Directed by Harold Ramis, written by Danny Rubin and Harold Ramis, stars Bill Murray, Andy McDowell, and Chris Elliott. Let's go to Cobb's Corner. So we'll be kicking off this review with, I'll be highlighting some of my favorite parts from the movie. Phil. Bill Murray, he plays a newscaster named Phil who is in Pittsburgh, and he has to go over to the town of Punxsutawney for Groundhog Day. If any of you who are listening are actually from Pittsburgh or from Punxsutawney and would like to, let us know about what the actual Groundhog Day traditions are, feel free to drop us a line. And also, go Steelers. We're a Steelers household over here at Cobb's Corner. And yeah, Phil, he seems like he's a pretty, like, pessimistic guy. He's a weatherman, and there's a blizzard coming in, but he says, like, he predicts that the blizzard will pass over and that's not actually going to hit Pittsburgh or Punxsutawney. And and he kind of just starts off the film as a real, just, like, pessimist, really, like, one of those, all right, let's just go over to Punxsutawney and let's just get it over with, and, I really don't want to be here, just really, just downright negative individual. And so he does this news report, and him and Chris Elliott, who plays Larry, the cameraman, and Rita, played by Andy McDowell. Like, the three of them, they do this news coverage of what I thought was kind of cute. They have like an actual groundhog. It's like a festival, like where like they actually ask a groundhog what like whether or not he saw a shadow. They ask groundhog named Phil, Punxsutawney Phil, if he saw a shadow, and the legend has it that like if the groundhog sees a shadow, then they get 6 more weeks of winter. But then if if the groundhog did not see a shadow, then it's going to be an early spring. Just a bit of like, I guess, context behind like the movie and the concept behind Groundhog Day. But yeah, he staying at a bed and breakfast, and he kind of just goes about that day in Punxsutawney, like just ready to get out of there. And wakes up the next day, only it's the exact same song. I think it's "I Got You, Babe," I think is playing on the radio the next morning, and that's the exact same song that was playing on the first day. So he was pretty much reliving that same day. And now I'm not entirely sure. Maybe you'll say it later on in the trivia portion, but the fact that he's like stuck in this like time loop almost kind of gave me Doctor Strange vibes a bit. Almost like Doctor Strange, or like movies like Live, Die, Repeat, Edge of Tomorrow. Live, Die, Repeat. Just kind of like that constant like time loop, where really he's sort of, Phil, he's really just like stuck inside of himself. He's forced to relive this day over and over and over again, and we only see but so many of those replays on screen. It's implied that off screen he had he had repeated that day even more times, but just to keep up with like pacing, and so yeah, for the purpose of the film, like we only see a handful of those repeats. But he pretty much goes from with each cycle. He runs into his old pal Ned, played by Stephen Tobolowsky, and yeah, he just has a different encounter each time that he relives this day. And it comes to the point where he is like pretty much, he realizes that all this like skepticism, all of this like negativity, this pessimism that he's had, like all like just bottled up inside of him this whole time, is really just eating him alive, and he has no choice but to change. Like in one of the replay days, he actually, like the same homeless guy that he walks past like time and time again, he actually goes and like gives him like a whole wad of cash and treats him to dinner. And unfortunately, in one of the time loops, the old man passes away. With each time loop, he gets to learn more and more about Rita. He slowly over time like falls in love with Rita, and so it he falls in love with Rita. And I think in one of the replay days, he even like gets a coffee for Larry, and he shows up to the Groundhog Day like with coffee for Rita and Larry and pastries. So yeah, Phil, he's so stuck inside of himself. He's stuck inside of himself at the start of this movie, and he eventually is forced to get out of himself. He's realized that because he was so self-serving, like really that didn't give him joy, that didn't give him like fulfillment by only serving himself. He really ended up depriving himself. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I think, and one thing I've noticed, not to get all preachy, but one thing that I have noticed, being as someone who born and raised here, born and raised in the United States. So I've grown up, in a Western, developed, Western liberal democracy, developed democracy. Everything's very like fast paced out here in the West, and a lot of us are very selfish. A lot of us are very self-serving. A lot of us are very like, individualism. A lot of us are very like egocentric, hedonistic. Like there's even a scene where Phil's at a diner and he just like orders a bunch of food. He's got like the 6 spread, he's got this like 6 spread of like all this food just for himself. It's like, so many of us, we're so self-serving. It's like me. And I mean, yeah, sure, it might look good, all the, having all that food, having, all that junk food on your plate, and it might look good, and then yeah, sure, it might taste good in the short term, but then you just feel sluggish. You feel sluggish. You feel tired. You feel like you don't want to do anything, and then you'll feel even more sad, and then it becomes a vicious cycle, and then you just keep eating more and more of that, junk food, that comfort food. And it's like, when really you have to break that cycle. So really, if anything, that scene where he had all that junk food on his plate, all that junk food that he ordered at that restaurant, that was really kind of a metaphor for his life. He said, I'm, self-serving. I'm going to continue to look out for number one. I don't need anybody. I hate my job. Me. But then he still, woke up and remained in that time loop. And over time, through the time loops, as I mentioned, he becomes closer and closer to Rita, and he eventually begins to do like random acts of service. He like ends up forcing himself to actually do acts of service, like fixing these elderly women's tires. He sees a group of elderly women driving, and then they have a flat tire. He shows up and fixes their tire. And because again, he's gone through this time loop again and again and again, so he knows exactly what's going to happen when it happens. He starts taking piano lessons. He learns poetry, and then it comes to the point. I think one of the last actual time loops that he goes through, he's at a party, and that's kind of like the climax of the time loops, because at that point it's like he has become a master at, he's pretty much become a maestro at the piano, a master piano player. He's become very friendly with everybody, and everybody who was at the restaurant, and everybody in that town, everybody loves Phil. He's pretty much a changed man. He's not the same cynic. He's not the same like cynical, like pessimist that we saw at the start of the film. But he could only go through that transformation, and at the end of the movie, he actually breaks that cycle. After falling in love with Rita, and getting to know Rita, falling in love with Rita, the two of them falling in love, and really love broke the cycle. Him learning to love people, learning to love himself, that is what broke the cycle. He had to get out of himself. Love wins at the end of the day, folks. And really, I know I mentioned I mentioned Doctor Strange. I think I kind of touched on this in my Doctor Strange review, and I had said how specifically the last scene, like the final like battle of Doctor Strange, when Strange is going through the time loops, well, a time loop that he put himself in against Dormammu, and how Benedict Cumberbatch, he starred as both the hero and the villain in the movie. Like, he plays both Doctor Strange, and he does motion capture for he did the mocap for Dormammu as well. So really, it's him versus him. It's him against his own ego. It's him forcibly, him going out of his way to sacrifice himself to keep the Earth safe, putting himself in a time loop and saying, I may not be able to win, but I can lose over and over and over again, and the Earth is going to be safe. Now, it's like with Phil, so then Phil going through the same the same routine. It's like he doesn't learn his lesson, each time, early on, it's like he doesn't learn his lesson. He's still the same cynical, pessimistic individual. But then over the several repeats, and after him actually dying a few times, dying a few times, after the same repeats again and again and again, he is forced to let go of his ego, to grow out of that overinflated ego that he had of himself, and go from being selfish to selfless, learning to live above his ego. Because it's even like the Ancient One said in Doctor Strange. I know this is kind of becoming a Doctor Strange review part 2, but the Ancient One, she had said we don't lose our demons, we only learn to live above them. So for Doctor Strange, he lost his hands, he lost the use of his hands, so he had to be able to find a way to still serve humanity without the use of Western medicine. And even the Ancient One literally told him point blank, it's not about you. It's not about you. And I say the same thing to you guys, in whatever it is that you guys do in life, be of service. Like in John Wick chapter 3, John Wick, he said, I have served, I will be of service. So definitely be of service, and that is truly what gives us meaning in life. Not constantly serving ourselves and, feeding ourselves, feeding our soul and focusing solely on ourselves and not thinking of how can I benefit humanity today? How can I help someone's life become better? How can I be of service to the world today? How can I serve my community? How can I make someone's day better? How can I make someone else's life better today? Because all we have is today. It's like Apollo told Rocky, there is no tomorrow. Tomorrow is not promised. All we have is today. Whenever you're listening to this episode, all you have is today. You will never be as young as you are today. You will never be this young ever again. It's up to us to get out of ourselves and to go and be of service to the world. And by serving the world, by being of service to others, that is truly what will give your life meaning. You add value to the world instead of trying to just add value to yourself, as opposed to just trying to stuff your face, both literally and metaphorically. Instead, you serve others. You make sure they eat before you do. Metaphorically speaking. You hold the door open for someone. You buy coffee for a friend. So yeah, this movie is really about us breaking our overinflated egos and being of service to the world, being of service to others, not being so focused on me. Because in the grand scheme of things, all of us, and not to sound cynical, but all of us are going to die one day. None of us are going to live forever. You, me, none of us are going to live forever. We're all going to die one day. And the world is going to keep on spinning. So, and life is short. Life is short. It could all end tomorrow. So, with the time that we have on this earth, it is our responsibility to be of service to others, to add value to the world, to change the world. It's not about us. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's not even about us. It's about legacy. And what we leave behind for future generations. One thing that at my graduation speech, Coach Jim Calhoun, those of you who follow college basketball, you'll know that he coached the UConn Huskies for many years. I even had the honor of shaking his hand. He had said how he implored us, the class of 2023, and I implored, my graduating class, the class of 2023, I implore us and challenge us to leave behind a better world. Specifically, class of 2023, those of us, will say, like, college and up, class of 2023, whether you got like your bachelor's, master's, PhD, bachelor's degree and up, it's up to us to leave the world better than we found it. Make sure that the world that many of us were born into, the 2000s, a lot of us, we inherited a kind of crazy world. All right. The year I was born, I always say that 2001 was a good year, but, 9/11 happened that year, and then on top of that, the war in Iraq, and even before that, Y2K, Kosovo, Columbine, the world was already kind of scary at that point. But it's up to every generation to leave the world a little better than they found it. To make sure that our children and our children's children inherit a better world. And it starts with all of us. So I implore, the class of 2023, as many of us are entering the real world. Many of us are, done with school. We are entering the real world now. It is up to us to build a better future, to build a better life. Not just for our children and our children's children, but for us, while we're alive as well. It's how you leave behind it's how you leave behind a positive legacy. And that is how you truly, that is the true meaning of life. That is self-fulfillment. It's being of service to others. And, Groundhog Day is pretty much an allegory for that. Getting outside yourself. And I know I sound like a broken record. I feel like I've been repeating myself the past couple minutes, but check out this movie, guys. I know I encourage you to check out all the movies that we talk about here on Cobbs Corner. I encourage you guys to actually go watch them yourselves. But this movie and every movie on this during this 8-week series, I really implore you guys, watch these movies. These are the movies that will change your life. These are the movies that you're going to actually learn from. Actually learning things. Not saying that you don't learn from, the Marvel and the Star Wars and the DC. that's all good. It's got its place, but I really just needed to unplug from that just for a little while. I needed to just take the summer off, take a summer break from the superhero movies, from all the mainstream stuff, and kind of, focus on some more like, kind of maybe social satire-ish, which I mean, Groundhog Day, it is a bit of social and even some psychological satire. But really, just like kind of step back and really just like analyze these movies, and I really hope that you guys check out Groundhog Day, check out all the movies on our on this series, because it will change your life. And as always, I want to hear your input. I mean, that is all I got in terms of my favorite parts, in terms of my review. On with the trivia portion. Okay, so on the IMDb page for Groundhog Day, and going forward, I'll use IMDb more going forward with this podcast. Earlier I actually forgot to read the official storyline. A weatherman is reluctantly sent to cover a story about a weather forecaster rat, as he calls it. This is his 4th year on the story, and he makes no effort to hide his frustration. On awaking the following day, he discovers that it's Groundhog Day again and again and again. First, he uses this to his advantage, then comes to the realization that he is doomed to spend the rest of eternity in the same place, seeing the same people, doing the same thing every day. That is from Rob Hartill, who wrote the plot and summary, the storyline. Rob Hartill, he's the plot author. He's a plot author who I guess works with IMDb. Go check this stuff out. Alright, so yeah, that is the storyline. Tagline: what would you do if you were stuck in the same day over and over? Anything you want and everything your heart desires. Actually, let me know, guys. I'll actually add that. That's actually going to be a question for those of you who are listening to this episode on Spotify. That will actually be a question attached to this episode. And if you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, feel free to just put that in the comments, or really on any streaming platform. Definitely give us the feedback. But for this question, for the tagline specifically, put your answer in the comments below, either on Spotify or on YouTube. So official genres: comedy, drama, fantasy, romance. Motion picture rating, MPAA. It is rated PG. I realized that the movie came out 30 years ago. It came out in 1993, and I realized that the MPAA was different. Movies back then were rated differently. It's my understanding. I know the movie Spaceballs from the 80s. With Rick Moranis. I think that movie's rated PG. That movie would definitely pass for PG-13 today. I want to say now, if you've seen Spaceballs, there's probably certain scenes that might pass for R rating today, if we're being honest. But yeah, the fact that the movie's rated PG for some thematic elements, okay. I mean, I probably would have given it a PG-13 rating, but it's what it is. Alright, some trivia. I'm not going to read all 139 items. Bill Murray was bitten by the groundhog twice during shooting. Murray had to have anti-rabies injections because the bites were so severe. Yeah, I mean, you gotta be careful. when you're filming, you got to train these animals. It's really difficult using animals on set. Granted, today we've got like motion capture and CGI. It's probably what we would do today. I don't know if we'd use a live groundhog, but filmmaking, it was a struggle back then. But Bill Murray, that man's a G for that. He's definitely a real one for taking, getting bit by that groundhog and pushing through. Perseverance. Probably be maybe the first 5 or 10. According to director Harold Ramis, God rest his soul, most of the time when he tried to explain a scene to Bill Murray, Murray would interrupt and ask, "Just tell me, good Phil or bad Phil?" I've mentioned before on this podcast how some of the best scenes are improvised. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this movie was improvised. It's like good Phil or bad Phil. Yeah, because a lot of the best scenes in movies are improvised, and they're not on script. Like maybe you have sort of a blueprint, but then you don't have to follow it to the T. There's room for kind of directorial, improv, I guess, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But to be honest, Bill Murray is just such an icon in this movie. I couldn't even tell. I couldn't tell you which scenes were scripted and which scenes weren't. Harold Ramis originally wanted Tom Hanks for the lead role, but decided against it, saying that Hanks was quote, too nice. Well, Hanks was too nice, I guess. Yeah, I mean, at that point, Tom Hanks, I'm not overly familiar with Hanks's roles, but I know he did Castaway, Forrest Gump. I was introduced to Tom Hanks through Toy Story, not gonna lie. Captain Phillips, yep. Yeah, I guess, him being too nice. Yeah, I guess, a lot of Hanks' roles are kind of more serious, and I feel like I just can't see anybody else in the movie Groundhog Day, because, Bill Murray was just perfectly cast. I mean, Bill Murray was perfectly cast in this role. What I would like to see, and I think Will Smith might have brought this up. This was pre Oscars slap Will Smith. He had a video on YouTube. I think it's on GQ, where he just went undercover online, and he responded to some I can't remember if it was Quora or Twitter, where somebody pointed out how Will Smith, he had turned down the role of Neo in The Matrix. I think the plan, he had turned down the role of Neo in The Matrix, but Will Smith's response to that prompt was how what he would really like to see is to have the same script sent to two different directors or two different studios and have two different versions of the same movie made. That would be what if in The Matrix we got Will Smith as Neo and Tommy Lee Jones as Morpheus, and then Men in Black we got Keanu Reeves as Agent J and Lawrence Fishburne as Agent K. It's what if we got Tom Hanks as Phil instead of Bill Murray? What if two different versions of the same movie, same script, two different directors, two different studios? I'd actually like to see that. At around 59 minutes, the scene where Phil picks up the alarm clock and slams it onto the floor didn't go as planned. Bill Murray slammed down the clock, but it barely broke, so the crew bashed it with a hammer to give it the really smashed look. Again, it's props. Props don't always break the way you want them to, and sometimes you got to improvise. And it's I think there was even a take in Guardians of the Galaxy where Quill pulls out the magic orb. They're at the collector's at the collector's shop on Nowhere, and I think he like fumbles the orb and like drops it and like picks it back up. Like that was all improvised, but they kept it in the movie. So yeah, it's like you slam down the clock and it doesn't really work. Improvise. All the clocks in the diner are stopped, mirroring Phil Connor's predicament. Wow. Okay, well. Eagle-eyed viewers, when you guys go and watch this movie later on tonight, feel free to pause any of the diner scenes and see, are all the clocks stopped? That's actually pretty interesting. I did not notice that. The film was not filmed in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, but in Woodstock, Illinois, just 50 miles from Bill Murray's hometown of Wilmette, Illinois. There is a small plaque that reads, "Bill Murray stepped here," on the curb, where Murray continually steps into a puddle. There's another plaque on the building wall at the corner that says Ned's Corner, where Phil Connors was continually accosted by Ned Ryerson. During the Ned scene, the sign for Woodstock Jewelers is clearly seen in the background. Wow. Yeah, the Woodstock Jewelers is clearly seen in the background. Okay. I'm wondering, like, that's kind of like how, a lot of Marvel movies are filmed in Atlanta. Like, I know they film a lot of their movies. A lot of the movies and shows are, like, filmed in Atlanta. Like, it'll take place in New York or, wherever, but be filmed in Atlanta. Like, I know for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the scenes with Isaiah Bradley, I think it's like the first or second episode, they go to Isaiah Bradley's house. The scene where Sam and Bucky are like leaving Isaiah Bradley's house, and it's supposed to take place in Baltimore, but I know it was filmed in Atlanta. And if you look closely, you can see the Martin Luther King house in the background. Like, they made no effort to try and like disguise that part of the city of Atlanta. So yeah, I mean, not every movie is like filmed in the city that it takes place in. I know a lot of movies are filmed in either Atlanta. There's a lot of space out there. New York. I've been to New York. I'm sure I've been to New York during like production on some movie, TV show. Like, I think the last time I was in New York, I saw signs saying like, no parking allowed for the next like week because they're like shooting or something. So yeah, Boston as well, Toronto. Yep, I know. I think the movie Chicago with John C. Reilly takes place in Chicago but filmed in Toronto. So, but yeah, now I have to go to Woodstock, Illinois. I realized on my No. I was gonna say that I had a layover in Chicago on my way to Micronesia, but I don't. I do not. But yeah, Woodstock, Illinois. I will be coming your way. To my listeners in Woodstock, give me a shout. Want to come through? Woodstock, Chicago, state of Illinois. Listeners in Illinois, make some Illinois for your boy. Harold Ramis directed the kids in the snowball fight to hit Bill Murray as hard as they could. Murray responded by throwing snowballs back as hard as he could. This is not the only movie on this list that has a snowball fight. Yeah, I mean, I feel like with a snowball fight, it's like, yeah, there can be some like a lot of moments that are probably improvised. It's like, yeah, you kids hit Bill Murray as hard as you can. Bill, you hit the kids as hard as you can, and quiet on set and action, and anything goes at that point. All right, last one I'll read. Bill Murray and Harold Ramis have both been honorary grand marshals for the Groundhog Day celebrations in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. I gotta go to Punxsutawney on Groundhog Day one of these years. Yep, now I gotta go to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. I might have driven through. Now, I don't know the state of Pennsylvania. I've been there like 2 or 3 times. I've been to Philadelphia a few times. I went to Pittsburgh one time for a conference for NSBE. Shout out to NSBE. Shout out to any of my listeners who are members of NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers. We had a NSBE conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 2018, so 5 years ago. We may or may not have driven through Punxsutawney because we were coming from Connecticut, so that's coming from the east. Pittsburgh is about 7 hours west of where I live. About 7 hours. So, yeah, gotta swing through Punxsutawney, swing through Woodstock. Definitely going through Wilmette, Bill Murray's hometown. Yeah, Wilmette, Illinois. Yep, definitely. All very interesting trivia goofs. Some of the goofs. At around an hour and 27 minutes, as Phil walks off the stage after performing the piano number, 2 background actors behind him are visibly fake clapping, but there is no clapping sound to accompany it. Whilst this is a technique used on set when recording dialogue, so the background actors clapping does not get recorded by the actors, the actor's microphone. For some reason, the sound editor missed this or decided not to dub it with 2 people clapping, giving this strange-looking result. You see, now I gotta watch this movie again. Okay? Like I just watched this movie for this review. Alright, we just had this whole deep conversation, and then... okay. At around an hour and 27 minutes, in the last part of the movie, Phil is seen playing the piano on stage at the party. As he finishes up song before going and talking to Rita, the piano in the soundtrack is playing a glissando, running a finger rapidly down the keyboard, while Phil is still playing as he was before. Finally, at the last run, Phil's hands match the sound. I might have slightly picked up on that. Alright. I'm only going to read one from Character Error. At around an hour and 12 minutes, when Phil is reading poetry to Rita back at his home, Rita dozes off. When she awakens, Phil says, "I think the last thing you heard was, 'Only God can make a tree.'" This is a partial quote of the last line of Joyce Kilmer's famous poem, Trees. Unfortunately, either Rita must have been dreaming it or Phil must have been quoting it from memory, as Kilmer's poem is not included in the book Phil is reading from, namely Poems for Every Mood, compiled and edited by Harriet Monroe in 1933. So yeah, that's again one of those improvised lines, one of those like sort of yeah, one of those like character errors that made it into the final cut. And to be honest, I wasn't even like paying attention to like the poem that he was saying. So how many of us were actually like paying attention to the poem he was saying and like actually realize that like, oh wait, no, he didn't say that. That wasn't in the poem. Like, okay, yeah. It just works. Continuity. At around 33 minutes during the police chase, when Phil is being chased down the railroad tracks, the police car has a rotating light bar. In close-up shots, the police lights flashing behind the vehicle are clearly strobe lights. Wow. Okay. Rotating light bar, clearly strobe lights. I mean, can you imagine police car with like strobe lights though? No. I don't really have much to say about that one. I'll read another one from Continuity. Since every day takes place on the same day, there should be the same amount of snow every night. However, there are clearly some nights where there is a lot of snow and others where there is no snow at all. Well, I'll play devil's advocate. Well, not so much devil's advocate, but let's, give this whole, Groundhog Day repeat the benefit of the doubt. What if Phil wakes up in an alternate reality every time that he wakes up in an alternate reality with that day where maybe it has or has not snowed the night before. Or in some realities, it has snowed the night before, but it hasn't snowed as much as other realities. That's my explanation. Continuity. Alright. Quotes. Phil, yeah, sport, I know there's a blizzard. When are the long distance lines gonna be repaired? Well, what if there is no tomorrow? There wasn't one today. Hello? Dial tone. Phil, hello? Hangs up the phone. He breaks a pencil and puts one half in front of the clock and the other on top. Right, and then he wakes up the next day and then the pencil's put together. Yeah. Alternate versions. AMC and Sundance broadcasts in the U.S. slowed down the film's audio pitch and speed at 4%. Wow, okay. So if you're watching this movie on AMC or Sundance, for those of us located here in the United States, the broadcasts, they will slow down the film's audio pitch and speed by about 4%. Alright, cool. Apparently this movie was edited into Pushing Daisy's Corpse Side. Oh, Corpsicle. Okay. Show Corpsicle, which I guess was a TV show from 2007. There's an episode that I guess, or no, Pushing Daisies. Pushing Daisies, I think, is the name of the show. Yeah, Pushing Daisies. There's an episode called Corpsicle where Groundhog Day was edited into the show. Pushing Daisies is on HBO Max, for those of you who are interested. Alright, movie was released on February 12th, 1993 here in the United States. Main languages it's available in English, French, and Italian, also known as Nagai Chaotsui. Probably mispronouncing that. I'm not sure what language that is. Production company Columbia Pictures. Filming locations 344 Fremont Street, Woodstock, Illinois. That's the location of the bed and breakfast. Now I'm going there. It had a reported budget of $14.6 million. $14.6 million estimated. Opening weekend in the U.S. and Canada, 12.5 million. That's as of February 14th, 1993. Its gross income in the U.S. and Canada, over $71 million, both in the United States and worldwide. So yeah, the movie definitely made a lot of money worldwide. And this movie, it's just such a cult classic. Maybe even a classic. I think we can just give it like classic status. It's definitely a classic. I definitely recommend that you all check out this movie. It will change your life. Before we end today's episode, I just want to quickly run through Rotten Tomatoes. It is certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 94% score, although I'm pretty sure there was no Rotten Tomatoes in 1993, and a lot of times with Rotten Tomatoes, you got to be careful about older movies that maybe were out before Rotten Tomatoes existed versus like newer movies. So, audience score 88%, critical score 94%. I kind of agree with both. I mean, I guess critics would probably rank it higher, but I think even if you like the first time you saw this movie, or even for those of you who are old enough to have actually seen Groundhog Day in theaters, I'm sure you probably, weren't thinking about like all the different all the symbolism and like the allegories. You probably thought like, oh, it's just a fun, winter comedy. Hey, Bill Murray. I mean, that works too. That works too. Fun romantic comedy. Little Valentine's Day movie. But yeah, I agree with the critics. 94%, just because of all the symbolism. Like it's a movie that just I feel like works for everyone. I think there's something for everyone in this movie. It's something for everyone, and you can watch it at any point, wherever you are in your life, wherever you are in your self-improvement journey. You can definitely just watch this movie and just have fun with it. Have fun with it, and be able to watch it twice. Sometimes some of these movies you got to watch twice. It's not too long. It's only an hour and 36 minutes. But definitely, check this movie out. And that is, all I've got for this week's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening all the way to the very end. This is the first time I've kind of had this new format for episodes, and I know most of my episodes are usually like, scripted, and I usually have like the intro and then the summary and the themes, but I just wanted to like kind of do something a bit different and kind of give you guys my thoughts and my opinion on things, kind of my takeaways, and kind of just give my input on these movies, because I really do think that these movies are going to change your life. These movies are the power of cinema. These movies are the reason why we love movies so much, the reason why we love movies here in Cobbs Corner, the reason this podcast, the reason this platform exists. So, if you made it to the end of this episode and you like what you heard, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating on all your streaming platforms. Subscribe to this podcast on YouTube, and turn on your post notifications, because we will go back to our regular uploading schedule of new episodes every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next week we will be reviewing Fight Club, so definitely stay tuned for that. As always, I will talk to all of you in the next episode, and I hope you enjoyed your stay here at Cobbs Corner. Peace.